It was just after 10 in the morning when Marcus Green pulled his dark sedan into a small rest stop along Highway 76, about an hour outside of Brookfield. He wore a charcoal suit with a crisp white shirt, the kind of look that said he was headed to something important. On the passenger seat lay a leather folder holding notes for a regional policy meeting scheduled for noon. For more than 20 years, Marcus had served as a respected community judge known across his state for fairness and calm decisions. But none of that mattered when a state patrol car rolled up behind him. Lights flashing. Inside the cruiser, Officer Daniels tightened his jaw. From his view, a black man sitting alone in a nice car looked suspicious. He radioed his partner, Officer Klein, still a few minutes away, but stepped out before backup arrived. Marcus lowered his window, keeping both hands visible on the steering wheel. "Good morning, officer," he said, voice calm and steady. "Is there a problem?" Daniels didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned Marcus slowly, full of doubt. "We've had a report of a stolen vehicle matching this description seen leaving a gas station nearby," he said flatly. Marcus frowned, not scared, but confused. "I'm not aware of anything like that," he replied. "I just stopped here for a short break before heading into the city. I can show you my registration if you'd like." Instead of taking the offer, Daniels stepped back. His hand rested on the holster at his sidestep. Out of the car, "Now," he barked. Marcus moved slowly, not wanting conflict. At 6 feet tall, he carried himself with quiet composure. By the time Officer Klein arrived, things had already escalated. Daniels had Marcus standing at the back of the car, hands raised. Klein looked uneasy, but stayed silent. "I'd like to know what I'm being accused of," Marcus said firmly. "I haven't done anything wrong." Daniels didn't respond. Instead, he opened Marcus's door, reached inside, and started searching the glove box without. "Permission," Marcus took a single step forward, "Officer. I do not consent to a search of my vehicle," he said clearly. That was all Daniels needed. "That's obstruction," he snapped. "You're interfering with an investigation." Before Marcus could respond, Daniels grabbed his arm, twisted it back, and slapped. On a cuff, Klein hesitated, then secured the other wrist. Marcus didn't resist. His voice stayed calm, but it carried weight. "You are making a serious mistake." A few travelers nearby had paused to watch. One young student quietly recorded the scene on her phone. Across the lot, a retired veteran muttered, "That man doesn't look like someone who stole anything," but the officers didn't notice. They were too focused on escorting Marcus toward the cruiser as if he were dangerous, and yet, even in cuffs, Marcus walked with dignity. Have you ever experienced something like this? Share your story in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. His head was lifted, not in pride, but in quiet disbelief that years of service, respect, and legal knowledge could be erased so quickly, reduced to nothing more than a profile and a presumption. In the back seat of the cruiser, Marcus stayed silent. His eyes drifted past the parking lot, past the blur of trees, searching for something beyond the scene unfolding around him. He wasn't angry, not yet. He was calculating, thinking, waiting, because he knew something the officers didn't. This would not end the way they expected at the state police precinct. Just outside Brookfield, Marcus sat in a hard plastic chair. The cuffs were gone, but the red lines on his wrists told the story. The booking clerk glanced at his ID, typed his name into the system, and treated him like just another man dragged in. Under suspicion, he wasn't shouting, he wasn't fighting back, and that calm, instead of earning respect, made them wary to them. Silence meant guilt. They mistook discipline for deception. Officer Daniels walked past more than once, each time throwing him a sharp, irritated look. Officer Klein lingered nearby, uneasy, but still said nothing. Nearly 2 hours passed. No phone, call, no explanation, only waiting. 3 times Marcus had asked, clear and respectful, to contact his office and explain his absence from a meeting in the city. 3 times. Brushed off as if his words meant nothing. The precinct buzzed with chatter, the tapping of keyboards, and bursts of static from radios. Other officers walked by, stealing quick glances. Some noticed the tailored suit, polished shoes, upright posture, but instead of seeing professionalism, they saw arrogance. One muttered under his breath, "Thinks he's special." Marcus heard it, but his expression never changed. Daniels stepped in again, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. "So, you gonna tell us why you were sitting there with the engine running, waiting for someone? Watching the lot?" His voice was mocking, not curious. Marcus met his eyes, calm and steady. "I was checking directions on my phone, preparing for a meeting downtown." "That's all." Daniels scoffed. "You people always got a story." Klein shifted uncomfortably, but stayed quiet. Marcus gave no reply. He knew this routine. They wanted him to break, to give them a reason, but he wasn't going to feed the cycle. After a while, the shift supervisor appeared, Sergeant Elaine Porter, early 50s, hair streaked with gray, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She stopped when she noticed Marcus. "How long has he been here?" she asked aloud. "Almost 2 hours," came the reply from a nearby desk obstruction charge. Vehicle match porter frowned, then walked closer to Marcus. "Sir, have you been advised of your rights?" Marcus nodded once. "Yes, ma'am, but I've not been allowed to call my office." "I've asked several times." Her gaze lingered on him more carefully. "Now." Something in his voice, calm and precise, made the sergeant pause. "What's your name again?" she asked. "Marcus Green," he replied firmly. "And I strongly suggest you check that name before this mistake grows larger." From behind her, Daniels chuckled. "He's been pretending to be somebody important since we picked him up." Sergeant Porter turned her head sharply. "That's enough, officer." Then back to Marcus. "Let me see what we've got here." She moved toward a nearby terminal, typing quickly. It would take only a few moments. But Marcus already knew what she would find, at first. She scrolled casually, expecting maybe a clean record, perhaps a traffic fine. But when Marcus Green's profile appeared on the screen, her brows drew together, credentials stacked line after line, academic honors, legal service, community appointments, and then the title appeared, Hon. Marcus T. Green, Presiding Judge, 9th District Court, State of Brookfield. Her eyes widened. The photo in the system matched perfectly with the man waiting quietly in holding. She blinked once, then rose from her chair, boots echoing across the precinct. Floor Daniels was still leaning against the wall. Smug Klein shifted awkwardly, trying not to meet Marcus's gaze. Porter stepped inside the room, face set, voice steady. "You said you had a meeting in the city?" she asked. "Yes," Marcus replied at. "No, I was invited to participate in a justice reform roundtable." "And you are?" she pressed. "Judge Marcus Green," he answered with a small nod. Porter exhaled slowly. "Your Honor, I apologize. This should never have happened." Behind her, Daniel straightened, sharply. "Wait, what do you mean?" "Your Honor." Porter turned toward him, eyes cold. "You arrested a sitting judge without probable cause. You searched his vehicle without a warrant, and you denied his right to contact counsel. Do you understand the severity?" Of this Daniels's confidence cracked. Klein looked pale. The silence in the room was heavy. You had his ID. Porter continued. "It was your responsibility to verify it. Instead, you escalated without reason. Finally." She turned back to Marcus. "Sir, I'm truly sorry. Would you like to contact the governor's office now? Or shall we arrange transportation?" Marcus gave a faint smile. Not smug, only weary. "Yes, I would." "Thank you." "Sergeant." She nodded and walked him out. The atmosphere in the precinct had shifted completely. Officers looked up from their desks, some embarrassed, some stunned. The man they dismissed as just another suspect was leaving with quiet authority, dignity intact, and as Marcus stepped outside, phone in hand, Sergeant Porter beside him, everyone left behind understood one thing. This was far from over. By that evening, the first recording was already spreading online. A 27-second clip recorded by a college student at the rest stop showed Judge Marcus Green being cuffed by Officer Daniels, his voice calm as he asked what crime he had committed. In the background, the student could be heard saying, "This is insane." He didn't do anything. The video spread like wildfire on TikTok, then on Twitter and Facebook with the caption, "Man arrested for being black." In a suit, within hours it passed 500K views by midnight. Over 2M local news picked it up before dawn, followed quickly by national outlets. Screenshots of Marcus's judicial profile appeared alongside frozen frames of his arrest. The contrast between his composed, dignified appearance and the rough treatment he endured ignited outrage. Hashtags like Judge Green, Justice for Marcus, and Rest Stop Profiling began trending across platforms. Civil rights leaders, lawyers, and politicians issued public statements. Some demanded the officer's suspension. Others called for deep investigations into the department itself. The governor's office, after confirming Marcus's scheduled participation in the Reform Roundtable, released a short but sharp message. "We are reviewing this incident and remain committed to equity and justice across all state agencies." Community groups called press conferences. Protesters gathered outside the Brookfield precinct. By late morning, signs read, "Judged before justice" and "Dignity in cuffs." What struck people most wasn't only the arrest, it was Marcus's silence. He didn't resist, didn't yell. He carried the look of a man who had lived this pattern far too many times before. That quiet composure became a symbol, not just of wrongful arrest, but of how deep the bias ran when even a judge could not escape it inside the precinct. The atmosphere had changed. Daniels was pulled into an emergency review. Klein stayed mostly silent, shaken. Sergeant Porter fielded calls from internal affairs, the press, and legal counsel, now working directly with the state attorney general's office. No one smirked anymore. A copy of the viral clip had been sent to every workstation. Officers watched with tight jaws and heavy silence. Some of the younger recruits whispered to each other. Maybe this was finally the moment something would change, for once the spotlight was turned inward. And this time it wasn't moving away. The next morning, the state capitol rotunda was unusually still. Reporters lined the marble hallway outside room 312, where the Justice Reform Roundtable was set to begin. Camera crews adjusted their tripods. Aides whispered updates into phones. The governor's staff, judges, and policy experts were already inside, but all eyes waited on the tall oak doors. The man whose name had been on every screen for the last 18 hours, Judge Marcus Green, at exactly 10 a.m. The doors opened. Marcus stepped in, focused, composed, wearing a dark blue suit, the same leather portfolio in hand, and that same quiet dignity he carried through the arrest. The room hushed. For a moment, the noise of politics faded, and something more human took its place. Everyone stood, not because protocol demanded it, but because respect did. Marcus gave a brief nod, then sat at the head of the table. Across from him, the governor leaned forward. "Judge Green, we're honored to have you here." Marcus replied simply, "Thank you, Governor." "Think the timing speaks for itself." Before the agenda could begin, Marcus asked to address the room. "Yesterday morning, on my way to this very meeting, I was stopped, detained, and handcuffed by 2 state officers. There was no warrant, no probable cause, only suspicion tied, I believe, not to my actions, but to my appearance." The video speaks for itself. His voice was steady, but carried a weight that filled the hall. "This isn't just about me. I'm not the first this has happened to. And unless we act, I won't be the last." Several officials nodded quietly. One younger legislator wiped a tear. Marcus continued, "We speak often of trust between law enforcement and the community, but trust cannot exist without accountability. And dignity, especially the dignity of innocent people, cannot be treated as optional." From that moment, the agenda shifted. What had been scheduled as a technical debate on training became something urgent. Something human clips were replayed, legal experts gave testimony. Civil rights leaders were invited in, and then came the unexpected turn. An emergency hearing was called to review charges of misconduct against Officers Daniels and Klein and Judge Marcus. Green himself was appointed to oversee the session at first. He hesitated, wary of appearing biased, but after the governor's legal counsel confirmed no ethical barrier existed, he accepted. 2 hours later, in the lower chamber, the review began. The room was crowded with press, staff, and community members. The officers entered without their usual confidence. Daniels pale, jaw clenched, Klein keeping her eyes fixed on the floor. Marcus sat at the center of the panel flanked by 2 other judges and the state attorney. "We are not here to relive public outrage," he began. "We are here to evaluate conduct to decide whether the actions taken violated both legal standards and human decency." The evidence was laid out. The viral video, witness reports, timestamps, and body cam footage that contradicted written statements. Klein admitted under questioning she hadn't verified the ID or run the name. Daniels tried to defend himself, but his voice shook. When asked why he denied a phone call, he stumbled through. An excuse about discretion that collapsed under scrutiny, Marcus stayed professional, but unyielding. The weight of his words made one thing clear. The era of casual abuse and unchecked power was ending here, and ending now, by 5 p.m. After hours of testimony and review, the panel reached a unanimous decision. Both officers were found negligent. They had violated protocol. They had denied basic rights. The ruling called for immediate suspension without pay, pending full investigation by the state attorney general. The official language was clear. This was a misuse of authority, rooted in bias and a dangerous failure of judgment. When Marcus read the decision aloud, the room fell silent. Daniels kept his, eyes on the table, lips pressed tight. Klein gave a small nod, as if acknowledging truth she had already known all along. Cameras outside the chamber caught every step of their exit. Protesters who had waited all day moved quietly aside. No cheering, no shouting, only silence. The kind of silence that follows. Truth finally being spoken. That evening at a press conference, the governor stood at the podium, Marcus Green at his side, calm and composed. Today was not about revenge, the governor said. It was about responsibility. Judge. Green showed the restraint and professionalism every public servant should strive for, but it should never have been necessary. He announced new legislation, a statewide program on de-escalation, racial bias awareness and citizens' rights, and the creation of an independent oversight committee to investigate future complaints against law enforcement. When asked to speak, Marcus stepped to the podium briefly. His eyes steady, his tone firm. What happened to me happens to people with no camera watching, no title to protect them, no one to speak for them. This isn't just my story, it's a symptom of a deeper wound. But wounds can heal, with sunlight, truth, and accountability. The words resonated within a week. Departments began auditing past arrests. Community halls opened their doors for dialogue. Legal clinics offered free counsel to citizens who believed they had been wrongfully detained. On social media, an image of Judge Marcus Green standing at the capital not angry, not vengeful, just firm, became a symbol of justice carried with dignity. As for Daniels and Klein, their suspension triggered reviews of every case they had touched in the past 3 years. Patterns emerged. Mistakes long buried. Rose to light Marcus, meanwhile, returned to his bench. He never spoke of the incident in court, never showed favoritism, never shifted his tone. But those who entered his courtroom felt it. They understood justice wasn't just a word carved in stone above the door. It was a living standard, one Marcus Green was determined to uphold, even if it meant standing alone. 3 months later, on a bright spring afternoon, Judge Marcus Green stood on the stone steps outside the Brookfield Law Enforcement Training Academy. The trees were beginning to bloom. Flags rippled gently in the breeze. Before him, 52 cadets stood in crisp uniforms, eyes forward, shoulders squared. This was the first graduating class trained under the new accountability and bias awareness standards. They had studied de-escalation, community trust, and constitutional rights. Reforms once called controversial were now the cornerstone of training, and it all began with one video, one moment, and one man who chose to stand firm. Marcus had declined many public appearances since that day, but this invitation felt different. This wasn't about headlines or cameras. It was about planting seeds where they mattered most. As he stepped to the podium, the academy director gave him a respectful nod. Marcus adjusted the microphone, his voice steady and calm. 3 months ago, I stood on the other side of a badge. I was treated not as a judge, not even as a man, but as a threat, based on nothing more than a glance and a guess. That experience could have made me bitter, but instead, it made me more committed. Not to punishment, but to purpose. He paused, letting the words settle over the group. You are not just here to enforce laws, he continued. You are here to protect dignity, and that begins with how you see people, every person, not as a threat, not as a statistic, but as someone's father, sister, neighbor, or friend. The recruits listened closely, their expressions more thoughtful than formal. A few nodded. Quietly absorbing the weight of his words, Marcus looked across the rows and felt something shift. Not just in the air, but in the culture itself. There was seriousness in their eyes. Not fear, not pride, but readiness. After his speech, the cadets filed out in pairs, families waiting beyond the field. One young black recruit paused, turned back and said softly, "Thank you." Sir Marcus gave him a small nod. Go serve with honor as the crowd thinned and the sun dipped lower. Marcus remained on the steps a few minutes longer. He wasn't thinking about the past anymore. Not the cuffs, not the cold chair in the precinct. Was thinking about what came next. Change doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives slowly, in small moments. One decision, one voice, one classroom, one step at a time. And in that quiet space, Marcus Green allowed himself to believe maybe, just maybe, justice was beginning to rise. Not on fear, but on fairness. He walked away from the academy steps that day, not as a victim, but as a builder of something better. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. True reform never is, but he also knew that real change begins in the quiet choices we make when no one is watching. His story reminds us that power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it stands still, speaks calmly, and waits for the world to catch up. In a country still wrestling with deep divides, Marcus's strength came not from anger, but from purpose. We all have a role to play, in a courtroom, in a classroom, or in our daily lives. Justice begins with how we treat one another, especially when we think no one will notice. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful true stories that challenge, uplift, and remind us of the quiet heroes among us. Because sometimes the strongest stand is the one taken with calm, clarity, and courage.